What's going on, guys? First things first, we're doing a live workshop call tomorrow. I'm going to be able to take any questions you've got. I'm going to be there with my bro Matt Cooper. Matt Cooper is a nutritionist and biohacker from up in Silicon Valley. He's my co-author on Warrior Soul Keto Camp. We're going to be taking any questions you've got about ketosis, about paleo, about fat loss, about muscle building, about hormonal health, about anything live, and the link to register is going to be below. Anybody who registers and attends the workshop is going to get a free keto grocery list and a free keto adaptation guide, a full guide that'll help you to adapt into ketosis. We do a bunch of these are usually a lot of fun. We get a lot of really great questions, and really we're just trying to put this out there because we're trying to put good information out there. But beyond that, I want to get into today's subject. Today's subject is about hormone replacement therapy. And I wanted to talk about this because I'm seeing a lot of clinics popping up all over the place. And I just did a podcast with interventional endocrinologist, Dr. Mark Gordon. I'll link the podcast below. But Dr. Mark Gordon is one of the preeminent interventional endocrinologists in the world. He specializes in helping people with traumatic brain injury, because traumatic brain injury can cause inflammation in the brain, which leads to the shutdown of a lot of hormone precursors. So what we're seeing with a lot of the guys who suffer from TBI from Iraq and Afghanistan is their hormones get completely shut down, and that could lead to symptoms that look a lot like post-traumatic stress. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because Dr. Gordon's approach to hormone replacement therapy is always to look at the root cause first. What that means is that a lot of times, if we're just injecting testosterone into our bodies to serve that function, to replace the testosterone that we're not producing, what's happening is we're not really looking at the root cause. And so the particular health issue that we're having, whether that's inflammation or whether that's been, a low-level TBI or something like that, we're not addressing that health issue. And because we're not addressing that health issue, we're really not fixing the hormone issue. So these are some things you really need to look at if you are deficient in certain hormones. And you should look at these things before you go and try to get that exogenous testosterone therapy. A lot of doctors out there are just going to give it to you. They're not going to ask you certain questions. They're going to see you're deficient, and they're just going to say, hey, here's some testosterone cypionate, inject it once a week or something like that. And the reality is that you should be trying to fix those root causes, in addition to trying to put a Band-Aid on the situation and getting that quick fix. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what those root causes are. I'm starting to lose my voice, so forgive me if I do. I want to talk to you a little bit about what those root causes are and how to take care of those. The first one is this, and I've got some notes up here because this is a very, very complicated issue. But the first one I want to mention is this, and this is stress. Stress causes a release of cortisol, right? That's the stress hormone. And this is perfectly normal. Everybody has cortisol. You can't survive without cortisol. It helps you to wake up. It helps you to deal with injuries. It helps you to recover. But here's the thing. Most of us secrete too much cortisol. And that comes from being overworked, overstressed. And the way you deal with this, right? The way that it creates deficiency in testosterone is because you're secreting so much cortisol, you're actually stealing the precursor, pregnenolone. Pregnenolone helps reduce testosterone, it helps reduce estrogen, it helps reduce cortisol. And when you overproduce cortisol or any of those hormones, it creates a steal from the amount of pregnenolone that you were supposed to make testosterone with. That's why they call it a pregnenolone steal. And so in order to deal with this, there's a few different ways. One, make sure you're getting enough sleep, make sure you're getting hydrated adequately, make sure that you are eating good nutrition, having enough calories in your diet, but also doing things like mindfulness and meditation. A lot of those stress relieving things that we can do for ourselves, doing things like box breathing, getting out in the sun, being in nature. All these things can help to reduce cortisol. If it gets really, really bad, there are Chinese adaptogenic herbs that you can take that can help with this. One of them is ashwagandha. And an interesting thing about ashwagandha, this is a side note, it was compared in one study with creatine in its ability to produce gains in muscle mass. And actually ashwagandha outperformed creatine in that one study. I don't want to blow it up too much. That was a single study. Excuse me. The other thing that can happen, or the other cause to testosterone deficiency could be from overeating calories. Now, when you overeat calories, you overproduce insulin. And when you overproduce insulin, one thing that happens is you upregulate something called aromatase. Aromatase is an enzyme that actually helps convert testosterone into estrogen, right? And so we hear all the time about bodybuilders getting gyno. Well, men can get gyno because from aromatizing their own testosterone as well. You know, like I said, this happens because we secrete too much insulin and we upregulate our aromatase. So one thing to make sure of is that you're not overeating calories. The other thing that can happen if you're overeating calories is that you can increase your levels of alpha-5 reductase, and that can actually that's an enzyme that can turn testosterone into dihydrotestosterone, and dihydrotestosterone is actually what makes us get bald. It creates male pattern baldness. So we don't want dihydrotestosterone. We don't want to be converting dihydrotestosterone or testosterone into dihydrotestosterone. So again, try not to overeat calories, especially when you're in your 30s. When you're younger, in your early 20s, late teens, probably doesn't matter as much. But if you overproduce insulin and you eat too many calories, you can be contributing to your fat storage, and that leads to these types of things: upregulation of aromatase and upregulation of alpha-5 reductase. That also leads to an increase of sex hormone binding globulin, and this is where we start to see things like erectile dysfunction, because the total testosterone, you get 2 counts when you're looking at your testosterone. You get your total testosterone and your free testosterone. You want a lot of free testosterone, right? That's what matters. And if it's bound up, you can't utilize it, and we start to see a lot of things like erectile dysfunction and other sexual problems. Because of too much sex hormone binding globulin. And so again, that also comes from overeating. Another issue is inflammation. And again, I talked about that with the work that Dr. Mark Gordon is doing with brain inflammation causing a decrease in the amount of hormone precursors that we create, right? So DHEA and pregnenolone, you know, those are all responsible for being produced from the brain, right? And when there's too much inflammation in the brain, that creates what he calls a non-neuropermissive environment. But inflammation can also affect our testicles. If there's too much inflammation, we get what's called Leydig cell failure. These are cells in our testicles that are responsible for producing testosterone. So what do we do here? Well, one major thing that I always make sure of when I'm working with any client is we want to take care of our gut. We want to take care of our digestion, right? Why? Because inflammation that's in the intestinal tract will inevitably get into the brain and into the rest of the body. Remember, you have 2 brains, one up here and one in your intestinal tract. It's because the brain is directly connected to the intestinal tract via the vagus nerve. And that's why when you're nervous, you get butterflies in your stomach. So anything that goes on in your gut, that could affect your brain. Anything that goes in your brain, that could affect your gut. And so we want to make sure that we have healthy bacteria, good gut microbiome. So making sure that you're eating a lot of good leafy green vegetables to increase a good positive environment for friendly bacteria growth in your gut. You want to make sure that you're eating fermented foods, and you want to make sure that you're eating foods that are both nutrient dense and digestible. Nutrient dense to help to battle the inflammation, because you know, any food we eat, whether it's fat, protein, or carbs, is going to cause inflammation. We need to make sure that there's enough micronutrition in there to help us to fight off that inflammation. But two, you want to make sure that it's digestible, because anything that's not digestible is going to cause inflammation in the gut, an undue amount of inflammation in the gut. So nutrient dense, digestible food, and making sure that we're creating a good environment in there. And this is what I wanted to mention. Vitamin deficiencies. I just said you want to make sure your foods are nutrient dense, but you could also have vitamin and element deficiencies that could lead to hormone deficiencies. For instance, if you're deficient in vitamin D, that's commonly associated with low testosterone. If you're deficient in zinc, that's also commonly associated with low testosterone. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of these things first before you're actually injecting yourself with testosterone, or before you go down that road. Because again, it could be just a Band-Aid you're putting on a much larger health situation that you need to take care of. And that's about it. I love you all. Peace.